my first deputy, Professor Liz.
Professor, good to see you. Dear students, professors, and distinguished guests, thank you, Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. As yourself rightly mentioned, post-2001, the people of Afghanistan had a unique opportunity in thanks to the efforts of our people and sacrifices of our people, but at the same time, the partnership from the international community, which the United Kingdom was one of the lead partners in helping us in providing those opportunities that yourself referred to millions of students, boys and girls, for education. Not only primary education, but also higher education. Our universities were closed for girls, but now dozens of universities around the country are there, and while our focus at this stage is on the quality of education, primary and higher education, our younger generation, energetically, with lots of hopes, they are there and hopeful to learn and to get educated and to rebuild their lives and their country and their future. And those are our best hopes. In my lifetime, when I was in university in Kabul, medical university, it coincided with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. That was a different era, and as a result, millions of people migrated outside the country, and the country went through difficult situations, but I decided to complete my education at the university in Kabul and graduate as a doctor, and then I joined the resistance against the Soviets. But I remember at that time, even at the most difficult times in the liberated areas of Afghanistan, we were trying to keep the schools running. When I say school, at times it will be a cave, at times it will be a tent. And one of my colleagues here today with me was studying in those schools, Dr. Mujib Rahman Rahimi, which later on he had the chance to go abroad and get his PhD here in Britain. But he's a product of those days, that difficult times. And throughout the history of mankind, our country, we can say it with humility, that had attributed to the civilization, to the science, to the literature, to the poetry, to the culture of mankind, but at the same time our people also have suffered as a result of the conditions which were imposed upon us. If I refer to the past 4 decades, the Soviet invasion was one, later on the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in terrorist groups, their time in our country. This was another phase, another period. And post-2001 was a unique opportunity. Today, the people are embracing those opportunities, especially our younger generation. At the same time, we are still faced with the same problems, with some problems and challenges, which security is one. In recent incident, which our clerics, our religious leaders in the country had gathered during the holy month of Ramadan, and they were calling on us, as well as the Taliban, which are fighting against us, at least to accept a ceasefire during the last days of Ramadan in our Eid, which unfortunately they were attacked and there were casualties as a result of this. And thank you for sharing your sympathy with us. And also thank you for supporting Massoud Foundation. Massoud was the national hero of Afghanistan, which had a vision. While he had to defend the country and lead the resistance against the Soviets, at the same time he would pay attention to the well-being of human beings in that country, especially in education, which I give you an example. And today we have in our society hundreds of those educated people which had received education under those circumstances. And luckily also lots of money educated people who had different opportunities in different part of the world, they also joined us, like from US, Afghans living there, in Europe, UK, other countries. Ambassador Jawad is one of those educated citizens of us, which received his educations abroad in Europe and in the United States. But at the same time, the sooner there was an opportunity, he returned back to the country, he contributed to the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the country. And we are proud to have him as our ambassador here today with us. As your Center of Religion, Reconciliation and Peace is dedicated to build a just and peaceful world, I have chosen to talk about the prospect of peace, prosperity and pluralism in Afghanistan. For the past 2 decades, United Kingdom has been a partner for building a peaceful, pluralistic and prosperous Afghanistan. We are committed to continue our struggle to build a better future for our citizens. We are grateful for your development in humanitarian support to enable us to improve governance and enhance access to education, healthcare, life-saving support for refugees and returnees. We are very fortunate to have many friends in the UK, as thousands of Britons, members of civil society, military, charities, and even current members of parliament have served in Afghanistan and are familiar with our struggle to build a peaceful and prosperous society. We are deeply indebted and sincerely grateful to every one of them for their services to the United Kingdom in Afghanistan, especially to those who served in the military, fighting alongside our security forces to make Afghanistan in the region, in the world, a safer place. We value the sacrifices of 456 British heroes who have fallen in Afghanistan, alongside 46,000 of our National Defense and Security Forces members. Their tough fight in the areas where terrorists had turned it into their home base, in difficult places like Helmand, not only defended the United Kingdom and Afghan national security interests, as well as the global safety, but also provided an enabling environment for Afghans in other parts of Afghanistan to live better and have access to education as well as civic rights. We appreciate United Kingdom's continued commitment. It's the 4th year since our defense and security forces have shouldered the responsibility of combat in our country, where your personnel, your armed personnel, men and women in uniform, are helping us, assisting us in training and advising our national defense and security forces. Dear friends, being the frontline state in the global struggle against terrorism, in the frontline state in defense of democratic freedom of our people, our security forces are accomplishing heroic deeds on a daily basis. Despite Taliban's relentless attacks on civilian targets and metropolitans, our army and special forces, supported by our emerging air force, are therefore defending our people effectively. However, the National Unity Government of Afghanistan is mandated by the strong desire of the Afghan people to end war, violence, and destruction in our country. Although domestic circumstances such as poverty, lack of economic opportunities, and inadequate access to social development services have contributed to the weakening of our security and stability, the key contribution factor of insecurity has proven to be external throughout our recent history. The greatest threat facing not only Afghanistan but also the region is terrorism, posing a serious challenge to our security and stability and that of the international community. While we continue to keep the military pressure on the Taliban to protect our civilian population, the National Unity Government of Afghanistan offers an Afghan-led peace process without preconditions. This peace plan is based on 5 pillars. When it comes to direct negotiations with Taliban, we have not set conditions for that. We have announced that we are ready to talk. Then we can discuss everything on the table. This offer has been there recently. It was reinforced during Kabul process, during a conference which partners of Afghanistan and countries of the region had participated. It was announced by President Ghani, the President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. It has the support of the people of the country. We recognize that the course of negotiations will determine the final nature of a political settlement that would lead to a mutually agreed end state in line with our constitution, the desire of the Afghan people and their rights, especially women and children. The region in the neighborhood has a role to play especially the countries where Taliban have found sanctuaries in it, and we are engaging with those countries, especially with Pakistan, where most of the Taliban activities are emanating from there. We are talking to our neighboring countries, including Pakistan. Recently, a senior high-level delegation, security and military delegation went to Pakistan. We are expecting a visit by senior Pakistani military leadership in the coming few days. So to come to a common understanding on the basis of a fact that instability in Afghanistan will not serve any countries, does not serve any country's interest, while stability and peace in Afghanistan is in the interest of peace, not only in our region but global peace. That's the basis of our argument, and we hope that we will have sincere cooperation in reaching the goal of peace. Another pillar of our efforts in reconciliation is building consensus amongst the people in regards to peaceful settlement of the conflict in Afghanistan. There is a broad consensus, but the way that it will happen, people have some concerns because, for example, Taliban are advocating different ways of life for the people. For example, their record of banning girls from education, their treatment of men and women of the country, certain freedoms and liberties that the people are enjoying, and these are the result of the sacrifices of our people throughout the past 4 decades. The rights of the people. For example, women of the country are concerned that when we are talking about making peace with Taliban, are we talking about giving back on our fundamental rights? The answer is no. These are fundamental rights of our people, which are as a result of the sacrifices and the struggles of our people, men and women of that country. Those achievements will not be reversed, and it will be an illusion to think that if we compromise on the rights of our citizens, on the basic fundamental rights and human rights of our citizens, then we can achieve peace. That will not be peace. So that part, in order to make that, to give that assurance to our people, we are engaged in a consensus building process, which our High Peace Council is leading those efforts. Regional and international cooperation is another pillar. Respecting and supporting the principles of Afghan leadership and Afghan ownership in the peace process, that's very important. While there are countries who can help, who can facilitate, who could be supportive of these efforts, but it's important that the efforts are Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. That's the that has to be and is the nature of the support that partners of Afghanistan are rendering towards a common goal. Experience elsewhere also shows that multiple processes in support of peace and reconciliation, moving towards different directions, sometimes even based on good intentions, mainly based on good intentions, will not help the process. But a focused effort in support of an indigenous effort towards peace, facilitating that will be the shorter way of achieving common goals. Another pillar is cooperation in support for counterterrorism. Terrorists are not making peace. They are not there in order to make peace. And people of this country also have experienced it at different stages. When they didn't get hands to weapons, then they use a vehicle or any other tool to take innocent lives. There have been examples here as well as elsewhere. There, what is needed is a strong resolve to address this menace in our region, in other parts of the world. What is the response from Taliban? I mentioned about our calls for being ready, keeping the door open for talks and negotiations with the Taliban. So far, they have not reciprocated our good intentions. But as the government of Afghanistan, we think that we should keep the door open. We should make further calls, and whenever there is an opportunity, seize that opportunity and help the country and the people towards achieving their common goal, which is a peaceful country, peace within and without. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on our path to prosperity, a new Afghanistan is emerging, where a new generation of Afghans graduating from those universities within the country or the ones which are returning from after receiving educations abroad, they are all contributing to the well-being of our people. And we are hopeful, and we see that this is happening. It will enable Afghanistan to stand on our own feet, not only in security, but also in the areas of governance and prosperity. Talking about the examples of the way that the people are embracing the opportunities and seizing the opportunities. There were thousands of men and women, including a mother with a newborn baby, sitting in a park on a stadium to take exams to compete for government jobs. Most of the jobs in the government at a certain level are being given as a result of exams across the country. In most provinces of Afghanistan, when these exams are taken, women are forthcoming in big numbers. While talking about stadium, these stadiums earlier under the Taliban were used for execution, for killing in daylight. So this gives you the example of the change, but by no means I'm implying that the challenges are challenges of the past. It will be the challenges of the past with the resolve of our people, but it is yet to happen, and the people are on the right path. The people of Afghanistan are on the right path. We are also fully committed to the principles of justice and rule of law, and have made access to information one of our thematic human rights priorities. I remember in my younger times, decades ago, when there was a coup d'etat by a communist regime in Afghanistan. That's exactly 40 years back. And prior to that, one day earlier, some of the leaders of the Communist Party at that time were arrested, and the announcement was made by one of the journalists in our only radio at that time, Radio Afghanistan. 2 days later, we didn't hear about that journalist which had made the announcement. He was just reading the news. It was not like he was responsible for anything. Hundreds of thousands of examples like this. One day I was going towards Kabul University in a bus, passing by the Ministry of Interior in Afghanistan. There were papers hanged in the walls of the ministry, which I didn't know at that time what was in it. But then later on, when I returned back, or when we were at the university, we learned that those were the lists of the people which were executed. 14,000 people. And in the afternoon, they had taken the list back because the families were rushing there to find the names of their loved ones, and so on and so forth. So this is the type of suffering that our people have seen in the past 4 decades. And this is the drive before our efforts to achieve peace in our country. While the achievements in our country, I mentioned about the sacrifices of our partners, including this country, which have made alongside our people. we invite all countries of the region and beyond the region to join us in a mutual quest for security and prosperity. To prosper, we must create an agenda for sharing our resources and collaborating to overcome our challenges. An agenda that will accommodate our national interest in the framework of regional cooperation for mutual benefit, whereby we create a set of regional rules in infrastructure for connectivity and collaboration. Afghanistan, Central Asia, even Euro-Asia are experiencing one of those rare open moments of history. We have an unparalleled chance to change the course of history in our favor by positively engaging with countries of the region and beyond, including India, China, and others. Our persistent regional cooperation policy for economic self-reliance integration is increasingly succeeding as new roads, railways, air corridors, power lines, and pipelines are being established as part of TAPI project, Heart of Asia Istanbul process, Belt-and Road Initiative, Chabahar International Transport and Transit Corridor, Lapis Lazuli Corridor, in others. Afghanistan is already beginning to regain its historical place as roundabouts of trade, commerce, culture, and civilizations. Ladies and gentlemen, economic prosperity and political stability requires agreement on reforms to balance of power across regions and between the central government and the provinces of Afghanistan. We are also firmly committed to improve our ability to deliver better services and to fight corruption. We have adopted a new anti-corruption strategy, a new penal code, and empowered the Anti-Corruption Justice Center and Major Crime Task Force to prosecute the offenders. There is upcoming parliamentary elections and district council elections, which our hope is that those elections will be credible and transparent, and that's the expectation of our people, and we are making our best efforts to deliver on that basis. We are committed to timely parliamentary and district council elections, but also presidential elections next year. When it comes to presidential elections, upcoming presidential elections, I suffice with that much because otherwise it will be considered as campaigning or something, which I am not intending to do. To build the capability of the Afghan government to meet the needs of its population, we will continue our work to improve a system in which all voices will be heard. With this in mind, the upcoming elections constitute important milestones in the development of a democratic and peaceful country, allowing for Afghanistan's political landscape to evolve into an increasingly inclusive democracy. Our fight for peace, prosperity, and pluralism will continue. We appreciate the support of our partners to stay at our side. Once again, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity in this beautiful part of the United Kingdom amongst our distinguished colleagues, professors and students. Thank you, Vice Chancellor.
Dr. Abdullah, thank you so much for that. I'd now like to invite Dr. Mark Owen from the university. He's the Director of the Centre for Religions for Reconciliation and Peace, to come and manage the questions, because Dr. Abdullah has kindly agreed to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for that profound and fascinating insight into peace building in contemporary Afghanistan, a subject of great interest to me, and it's very tempting as the chair now to read out my own long list of questions first, but I feel I'd be abusing my position, so I'm going to open the floor up to any questions, please. Please.
Your Excellency, you've spoken passionately this evening, and also the valiant efforts of the Afghan security forces, but also the frail and open moments in your country's history. Can I ask, what role do you see, and for how long, the role of the United Kingdom and her NATO partners in the enduring security situation in your country?
I'd like to ask you, I've worked for the School of Media and Film, and I'd like to ask you what your position is on the role of journalists in Afghanistan's future.
And one more, please, sir.
Peace is very important in Afghanistan, which we all recognize that, but something, does the government not think like unconditional peace for the people like Taliban will not be easy at all? And each time the government is moving forward towards peace, yet we see another blast, another blow in different parts of the country. So it's all from one side, the government every time is saying peace, peace, peace. And to me, it is like supporting the Taliban. What would be the solution? Not, in my opinion, the most Afghans that I see on a daily basis, more military force against this type of groups, because
I got your point.
You can't just go beg for peace. You have to be strong, like the government of Afghanistan should go strongly towards peace and forcing them.
I got your point.
Okay.
I got your point. Thank you. In regards to how long it will take them or the international partners to stay there and enable us to towards self-reliance before they leave the country, the forces. If I may give you the example of the past, let's say 6 years, like 7 years back. 7 years back, there was over 150,000 international troops. Today it's around 15,000. And the increased level of violence in the past 4 years is also because the withdrawal of the forces were quick, and the announcement was made earlier in 2012, and Taliban were hoping that post 2014 they can come back full force, and they did their level best, but the combat role is mainly, completely on the shoulders of the Afghan defense and security forces, national defense and security forces. That shows the difference. Well, I'm sure you can appreciate when I'm talking about 150,000 international forces. With it comes air power, logistics, reconnaissance, intelligence, all resources available to them. With the withdrawal, of course, you can see the situation. So that shows progress. Currently the forces there, international forces there, under the RS Resolute Support Mission, it's to train, support, assist, and advise mission. That's the mission, and there is a counterterrorism aspect to it as well, which the United Kingdom is also part of that. In 2002, 2003, we were talking about our national army, how to start building a national army, national police, or national institutions. Only from the institutions which the United Kingdom has established in Afghanistan, military academy, Marshal Fahim's military academy, and also Sandhurst College in our country. 35,000 officers have graduated. So that shows that gives you the impact. How long? I think the conditions are changing. More and more our own forces and institutions are shouldering the responsibility. Currently, the commitment is until 2020, and that was decided in Brussels conference a few years back. And in the upcoming NATO summit, the NATO countries will decide about the future commitment. The role of journalists in our country, in media, from a situation where media was suppressed, and in the official version was the only version available to our people in the areas under Taliban control, to a situation that we have dozens of media outlets, newspapers, TV channels, radio channels, FM and AM channels received in a sort of countrywide manner. That's a big change. That's one aspect of it. But at the same time, I mentioned earlier that some of the achievements, some of the changes are irreversible. The people know the value of their freedoms, including freedom of speech, and the way that the media as well as people enjoying their freedoms, they are dealing with the government and criticizing the government and raising issues and keeping us, all of us, at any level accountable. Just by following one day of what's going on in our national media outlets, you can see that how much changes are there. But journalists are in the front line. When an atrocity takes place, they are the first one to report it to the people and worldwide. And journalists, unfortunately, have been also a target of violence by these terrorist groups, not just today, but also in the old days. I mentioned an example of one journalist exactly like 40 years back. Then, of course, there was a period of suppression of the freedoms of the people, and then Afghanistan was liberated, then Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The way that they impose their rule over the people is to suppress the voices of the people. That's the tactic of the terrorists. You have seen unfortunate and tragic examples elsewhere as well, in the Middle East or in other parts of the world. But journalists are playing an important role in part of that evolution. Civil society, journalists and activists, humanitarian workers, and our religious scholars are all part of these changes which we are witness to. What Afghanistan and National Unity Government has announced, it's not unconditional peace. It's not putting conditions for starting talks in negotiations. I think it is. I still believe that this is the right approach. The Taliban, by refusing our cause, they are making a big mistake. They continue to make that big mistake, and they are taking a big responsibility on their shoulders. Responsibility of loss of lives for people of Afghanistan and loss of opportunities for the people of Afghanistan. And there is no doubt that our prime focus has to be how to protect our citizens in our country, and more efforts needed to be done. But I don't think that we have an example of any country being able to give 100% security guarantee for its citizens, let alone in our situation where we went through all these sufferings and upheavals in the past 4 decades. So from one side, our people are making, our soldiers are making sacrifices in defending the rights of the people and the rights of themselves. From the other side, we have to be prepared for starting the talks. And whenever there is an opportunity, we should seize it. The fact that it is the reality in the response from the Taliban has been negative so far, that's the sad reality. We are not ignorant towards it. But to close the door for talks and negotiations, I don't think that will be a solution. There is no situation that you have an example as such that genuine desire of the people or nations materialize by just saying that we will end this with war, with use of force. It's not only the conditions within Afghanistan that has an impact on the situation. There is the regional situation, there is the neighborhood, there is the international cooperation which is also required. So while I agree with your analysis that from one side there are calls for peace, from the other side there is rejection, I think that these calls for peace in negotiations are the right ones. That one also, I believe.
Thank you. Could we take 3 more questions, please?
Negotiations are going to have any effect if Afghanistan the government isn't willing to make any concessions to the Taliban. How is it going to be possible to make any ground when they do not want peace?
This gentleman, please, yeah.
Hello. Hello, Excellency. It's Rowan Curry from the University of Cambridge. My question to you was, you were talking about the evolution of young people in Afghanistan through education and more going to universities. For someone who is Afghan and was brought up in the UK, I love my nation and I want to send a message out to all the young people who are Afghans. What can we do for the country which we have never visited? What can we do and how can we put our foot in the door to help Afghanistan? Thank you.
Universities in our country, these are vibrant places for discussions, for debates, for arguments, for presenting challenges to the authorities, and very much a lively environment. And obviously, peace and well-being of the people are most in the minds of those young students, boys and girls, in professors and those who are in those sort of environments. They provide platform for debates. They argue different sides of it, like the questions asked here. These are part of those questions asked there as well, and talking about compromise and being ready to compromise. The first thing that we need to hear is the readiness of the other side for talks, and then once two sides sit on two sides of the table or around the table, then issues will be discussed. For example, Taliban have ideas about how to rule a country, their way of life. If they agree at one stage to give up violence and sever their links with the terrorist groups and fight for their ideas politically, not through violence, we are open to that, and we welcome such a development. At the same time, we're 100% sure that if they fight for those ideas politically, the absolute majority of the people of Afghanistan, which are aware of their rights, which are enjoying their rights under difficult circumstances will not support those ideas. But it's important that that groups which are fighting against us, they put their agendas through peaceful means and pursue it through peaceful means. There we are not worried. Those will be isolated ideas and will not be acceptable to the people. Yes, of course, there will be certain other things, certain other demands. For example, a group which was fighting alongside Taliban against us, now they are part of the peaceful process. They had certain demands, and which we once they entered the negotiations, we started talking about it, and then eventually we had an agreement with them. So now that group is not fighting against the people of Afghanistan anymore. That's a recent example. Of course, Taliban issue is much more complicated than that. Their linkages to the terrorist groups, their linkages to the narco mafia, all these in the support that they get, the sanctuaries that they have, these make it more complicated than that. But the essential thing is that one gets around the table and start talking. Once they accept that principle, then the rest of it will be discussed, and then the people will raise their voices in support or against ideas which will be raised. The Afghans who have received education abroad, they are already contributing, as I mentioned earlier, and they come and visit us. They see their areas of interest in the areas of profession. They participate in the private sector, or in the they wish to serve in the public sector. There are good examples of that as well, which we have. Unfortunately, in the past few years, the announcement of the withdrawal of the international troops, which was done prematurely, that created an atmosphere of uncertainty. In 2012, it was announced that 2014, the international troops will withdraw. And also, the pace of withdrawal, the slope was very steep. So a transition which was taken into account, that was not well calculated into that process, which later on we had the consequences of that. But at the same time, Taliban believed that 2014 is the year of their victory. That has not happened. Also around Afghanistan, in the region, certain new factors emerged, like Daesh in the Middle East. That was not a factor a few years back. These new emerging threats also had an impact, which of course has interrupted with the opportunities which would have been there.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So we've got time for one more round of questions. So, yeah, please.
Close colleague of the late Ahmed Shah Massoud, who was a great leader and who was murdered by Al-Qaeda 2 days before 9/11. He was unquestionably one of the great unifying forces, one of the great unifying people in your country. I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about the work of the Massoud Foundation and how his legacy is being carried forward in Afghanistan today.
Afghanistan has been named by some historians as the graveyard of empires, mainly due to the strong desire of its people to remain independent. With the policies your government pursues of education, increasing infrastructure, corresponds to a larger centralization in the country. How do you expect the people to react to this increased centralization? do you believe that democracy would counteract that factor, or a cultural shift would be necessary for that?
Last question, please. Young man at the back.
You spoke about the important role that British forces, amongst others, have and had in the protection of the people of Afghanistan. But to what extent do you agree with the methods employed by these NATO forces in the elimination of militants by using drones, for example, which sometimes causes civilian casualties?
And Your Excellency, can I just take advantage of my position to add something that I think is related to that? The dominant discourse at the moment in international peace building is about respecting, empowering local religious, cultural traditions of peace building. And I could be wrong, but I sensed in your talk you didn't think at the moment that balance perhaps was quite right, so I could be wrong. But could you just say something perhaps to end on about whether you thought international partners, actors were respecting, making use of, supporting the development of local indigenous forms of peace building and reconciliation?
The gentleman here.
Oh, sorry.
Raised his hand several times. Yeah.
One more, thank you.
We've been speaking about the regional cooperation, which is again great to achieve this. Mainland looking into Russia, then into China. How Russia is still interested in any sort of cooperation? Why use resistance and controlling all aspects of the region? And then for Russia, it's the threats, the emerging threats of ISIS or Daesh in the northern part of Afghanistan. And they think, well, Russia is just a relation, will get threats to Russia. And then again, the narcotic issues in drugs in Afghanistan, that's actually hitting Russia badly. Do you think that Russia will still cooperate with Afghanistan in a way to empower the leadership in the country?
Okay. In Massoud Foundation and late Ahmad Shah Massoud, which was a resistance leader during the Soviet occupation of the country, later on during the Taliban and Al-Qaeda occupation of parts of the country. His legacy is legacy of freedom and rights of our people. And then the foundation follows that. While it's not political, the foundation, but the ideals of peace within and without, tolerance, pluralism, respect for the culture of the country, and respect for human values, human rights and women's rights. These are the values which Massoud Foundation is pursuing. I was the Secretary General for a while, and this was what I enjoyed most. At times that I had not resigned from politics, but I had myself a little bit back from the politics, and then again politics came on the way, so I couldn't fulfill all that I wanted to do in that capacity. In today, it's the foundation is led by a brother of late Ahmad Shah Massoud, Ambassador Wali Massoud. In different parts of the country, it has different rules. For example, in one of the provinces, Takhar province, thousands of people have received education at different levels with the assistance of that foundation. Once again, I want to thank the University of Wenchester for its support for the foundation, promoting the culture of our people, bringing awareness about the history of the country, the proud history of the country, and the contributions of our people to the civilizations. These are things that younger generation of us, they need to know. They need to be aware of it in order to be able to build their own future, and in order to have more hopes about the future. He was a symbol of hope for our people. Like today, we are talking about the past 17 years, the campaign of the international partners of Afghanistan. At times, he was alone. Nobody was supporting him except a little bit of support in the neighborhood, in the region, which we were we are grateful for that. But he was doing it alone, on his own. And I may share one of my my memories with him. I was acting foreign minister at that time for the resistance against the Taliban, which was the official government of the country, but not based in Kabul, but in rural Afghanistan, in northern Afghanistan. But I used to travel to different capitals. I traveled to different capitals, including London, and returned back to the country. And he asked me that, what did you see? What did you bring as a message? I said that these countries, they do not realize the potential threat which is there with Al-Qaeda, with these terrorist organizations for their peace and stability, and we might not have any support, any soon. And he said that, look, you have not lost your trust or confidence over the fact that we are on the right path. I said, no, I see these dark forces which are depriving the people opportunities and killing innocent people and terrorizing the nation, attacking the culture of the country. In all of this, I have no doubt in my mind that these are not the right people. He said that, okay, one day the whole world will learn about it, and you will remember that they will come with support here in this valley, and that will happen. That was 5 years before we received assistances in that valley post September 11. Or in another occasion when he traveled to Europe, he was invited by the European Parliament. He spoke about the threat posed against Afghanistan, but against global peace. And he was asked that, what is your message for President Bush? President Bush at that time was newly elected. He said that if they don't make efforts to bring peace to Afghanistan, this fire will catch their skirts. This is an expression in our own language. And this is exactly what happened. Then we had, the same year, we had September 11th. So as a citizen, I'm still committed to those ideals in support of the Massoud Foundation, but it is pursuing the ideals of him and the values that he sacrificed his life for it. Post September 11, once again, the same question was asked that how would Afghanistan see the presence of international troops if it happens? If the world decided to send troops to Afghanistan, whether the people of Afghanistan will reject it, will resist against it, or will have a different attitude. I believed at that time that the people of Afghanistan understood at that moment that they needed, the challenge was overwhelming. The terrorist networks was so strong at that time that we, with our own resources, we wouldn't have been able to stop them. And we also had lost the leader of the resistance, that was a big loss. The people had started losing hopes for the resistance against Taliban and Al Qaeda, and that was my belief at that time, and that's what happened. The people of Afghanistan, while they are independent-minded, we want to be self-reliant, and our efforts are in that direction. At the same time, they understood the gravity of the situation, and they do understand the gravity of the situation today. In between, we made mistakes, all of us, those who were engaged in Afghanistan, and us as the people of Afghanistan, the leaders in the country as well. We missed some opportunities. That's a different issue. If the engagement in Afghanistan is seen as a cultural invasion, there will be a different attitude. If it is seen as occupation of the country, the people will react differently. When it is seen as support, as help, then the attitude will be one of appreciation. When you talk to the ordinary people, at times when that's also to the next question about the civilian casualties related to that. At times of civilian casualties, the people will be angry. The people will show their anger, and they have the right to be angry. But at the same time, they are not. They know that it's not deliberate. And at the beginning, there were a high number of civilian casualties as a result of the military operations. That in itself had led to resentment amongst the people, which was not helpful, especially when afterwards there was no apology, there was no admission, which that attitude changed in the course of many years. First, much more attention is paid in order to avoid civilian casualties. But in the war, unfortunately, it happens. But once the unfortunate situation is there, then the forces, the military leadership of our partners are forthcoming in reaching out to the people, to the families, and to explain if there was a mistake. They will say that it was a mistake. If there was that was based on the wrong intelligence, then they make that admission. This is also part of the culture. Then the people are forgiving. When the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, when it ended, we didn't announce that we will be the enemies of the Russian Federation forever because of everything that happened during the Soviet occupation of our country. Over 1 million people were killed. 6 million people were refugees in the neighboring countries and also in other parts of the world. Over 1 million people were disabled. This happened, but once the occupation ended, the people of Afghanistan were after rebuilding their lives in their country, rather than continuing animosity with a country or with a regime which inherited, which followed the Soviet Union. That's also part of the nature of our country. The same takes me to your question, and not in a broader scale, but in a smaller scale, this happens days in and out in the villages of the country, the rural part of the country, where the people are using their own ways and means, reaching out to those who are fighting, in making efforts and taking risk in reaching out to them in order to encourage them to join the peace process. Perhaps we have not made enough use of that as a tool in the as I mentioned earlier, the High Peace Council. One of the jobs of this High Peace Council is to see and to build consensus amongst the people, and the messages given to those who are fighting against us. For example, in the last rounds of elections, Taliban had threatened the people not to participate in the elections. That was in 2014, and then they cut the fingers of a few people in Herat province. You remember that. But in the hospital bed, the gentleman gave an interview that this is our right, this is in respect of those who are martyrs in achieving our freedoms. You cannot stop us by cutting our fingers. So that shows the way that the people are embracing these values. So in relations to the earlier question, democracy. For us, I was talking in the same line in my official meetings as well. Today, For us, it's not a luxury. It's something out of realization of the people that they know that we can achieve our rights through political participation, through elections, through enjoying the rights in creating an enabling environment for the whole nation to enjoy their rights and their freedoms.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to draw it to a close there, and I'd like to hand over to First Vice Chancellor Professor Liz Stewart for the final vote of thanks. Thank you.
It's my pleasure and privilege on behalf of the University and on behalf of all those who are present this evening to thank you, Your Excellency, for being with us and for addressing us. It's a rare privilege to be in the presence of a living hero for peace and freedom. And that is what you are, sir. You've reminded us that education is the foundation of a free and democratic society. And you've reminded us that freedom is always built upon sacrifice. I think I'd be most impressed, sir, by your wisdom and by your humility. It's written, I believe, in the holy book of the Quran, that the true servants of God, God the most gracious, are those who walk on earth in humility, and when the ignorant address them, they reply with words of peace. I think you embody those words, sir. On behalf of everybody here, thank you so much.